He wrote a book that he's well known for called The Giza Power Plant that suggests that the pyramid was essentially a device for producing energy. And he explains every facet. What's interesting about his theory, to me personally, that still sits within like, well, we're trying to use our perspective to kind of explain it.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about it is that he does explain every aspect and element of the pyramid in that. And using his theory, he successfully predicted what was behind Gate and Brink's door, which is like a whole other. There's a couple of these shafts that run out of the chambers in the Queen's Chamber in particular was the one they're talking about. There's these shafts that run out. They're very small, like 10, 12 inches sort of wide.
Is this like when you look at like the anatomy of the pyramid?
Yeah, you see these little shafts.
Can you Google the anatomy of the Great Pyramid and we can have a visual for this? Yeah. But yeah, so there's the tombs in there.
Well, there's the King's Chamber. Well,
chamber.
So-called. I call them so-called King's Chamber. There's an upper chamber, a lower chamber, and then the subterranean chamber.
Right.
So also called the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and subterranean chamber. Now, there is shafts that lead out from the King's Chamber that eventually reach the outside of the pyramid. The Queen's Chamber ones terminate somewhere inside the pyramid. And when they finally sent some robots up there to look at it, they found, whoa, there's a door here. Like this little shaft eventually terminates with a little limestone door and what looks like copper handles in it. So they eventually said, we'll get another robot, get a drill, and we'll stick a camera in there and have a look. And so Chris Dunn, using his theory, successfully said, well, under this theory, what you should find after that door is a space and another door. And that's exactly what they found. So yeah, there you go. That's this image here shows you the upper chamber. The red there is the what you would call the King's Chamber with it has a series of chambers above it that are all these essentially 70-ton granite blocks that are all stacked up in its internal structure. And it has these shafts labeled as 10 on this diagram that reach the outside.
So the shaft, what's the shaft that put the camera down where you saw the door?
Not like 7, I think, is the 7, the Queen's Chamber shafts. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's I mean, by the way, you got to understand the ridiculousness of the orthodox explanation for all of this is that so when apparently when Khufu had this built, he was going to be interred in number 7 there, what's called the Queen's Chamber, and then he changed his mind and said, you know what, put it further up in the structure and do that, and they just built it on the fly, which is absolute nonsense. I'd like to point out, like the precision of this structure is rarely matched to today, and in fact wasn't matched until the 1800s in terms of how precisely the Great Pyramids aligned. And there's about a million other aspects to the Great Pyramid that we could talk about.
Oh yeah, we don't like this. Fuck it. Let's make it a little bit taller.
Yeah, make it a bit taller. Like then that's the idea. They did this on the fly. It's absolute nonsense. And I have a couple of videos that look at this stuff too. Is that one of the things that's remarkable about it is the structure itself is interesting, but the actual foundational work that went into the ground to prepare and build on top of is just as interesting, like an engineering challenge and puzzle, because they must have spent years and years preparing the site. To basically take this object. And this is the case both with this pyramid and in particular the middle pyramid, because it's not on flat ground. They had to prepare the ground. Like they literally, the whole thing's locked into the ground with these foundational tiles of limestone that some of them weigh like 150, 200, 300 tons. And it's dug down, and they created a foundation layer for the pyramids. And in particular on the middle pyramid, it's actually built into a sliding, like a sloped hill on the I think it's the western side of the pyramid is like it's cut down about 30 feet. So you can actually go around, if you go around the western side of the middle pyramid, it's like this 30-foot wall where they've cut down into the bedrock, then they've leveled that out, and then they've built up the eastern side with these huge tiles, and then they've built this like millions of tons structure on top of it. And some of and they've actually used the bedrock to lock it in too. So instead of like taking all the bedrock out, they actually like on the southwestern corner, the top 5 courses of that pyramid are actually bedrock. So it's not tile, it's not like blocks. They shape the bedrock and then it just integrates with the slope of the hill into the rest of the structure to where all the way on that eastern side they built it up with foundation tiles and locked it in. So that whole thing is just locked into the bedrock. Like that's one of the reasons it's still standing and they resist earthquakes so much, is that they are so well designed, and there's been so much engineering about how these things are locked into the bedrock that they have put up with all these earthquakes, and they're still standing, versus so many of the other structures from ancient Egypt that were done later that have all fallen down. So going back to what you were talking about with Chris Dunn, when they were sending the cameras up down those pathways to go into those chambers, he predicted what was going to be on the other side of that door accurately? Yeah. So what was on this? It was a space and another door.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the little copper things, they look like door handles. They could have been electrodes. So that's how they fit into his theory. I'm not 100% up to date on that book. I haven't read it in a while. But what's interesting to me is that using his theory, he accurately predicted what they would find, and that's what they found. So Chris is writing another book. He's writing a follow-up to it. He's got some more data now. There's been more research done on the Great Pyramid. In fact, there seems to be indication of a whole other series of chambers in there that we haven't discovered yet. There was something called muon detection. I forget, the Scan Pyramids Project was the name of it. So they've been doing this. Is actually a great experiment. I hope they do more of it. But they've been doing this for years, where they put these cosmic ray detectors inside the structure. In fact, the last couple of times I've been down into both the Queen's Chamber and the subterranean chamber, which are normally off limits to tourists until you get a special permission. You can go in there. They have racks of equipment, and they've been doing these muon detection experiments for a couple of years now. So you're looking at cosmic ray particles, and there's a slight difference when they go through a material versus through a void. So by detecting this and analyzing and compiling this data over years, they've kind of determined that there are a couple of large voids still inside that structure that we haven't discovered yet, or not publicly discovered yet, I'd say.
Wow.
So we'll see what happens. And of course, this announcement caused some angst with the Egyptologists who came out and said, well, there is no such. I mean, Sayuwas went between. Well, there is no other chambers, and if there are other chambers, we already knew they were there, and it's this crazy response to it. So I don't know. I hopefully whatever they discover there, they make it public. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are things like that have already been discovered and then kept on the down low, because they don't really match the regular story.
What if they just wanted to keep it secret so they could sell it to another country for like some sort of like weaponry purposes?
Or if they found out what it does, or something like, we turn this one back on. I don't know.
Oh my God. Could you imagine?
Yeah, I'd bring it on. Why not?
What is the story there? Now, isn't a part of it underwater? How does water relevant to some of the chambers underneath, and isn't water used somehow? Yeah.
So this is an interesting dynamic that you see both at Giza, Saqqara, you see it in Peru, that there seems to be a correlation to like underground water. There's definitely water. So there is groundwater. So there's a shaft at Giza that's halfway down the causeway of the middle pyramid. It's called the Osiris shaft, and it runs like 120 feet or something down into the bedrock of the plateau. And there's three levels, and they have these chambers, and there's, funnily enough, boxes and things down there. But at the bottom level, like, there's only a couple of feet of clearance, because the rest of it is buried. It's in water. Like it's all the groundwater's seeped in and it's risen up. So yeah, there's definitely water involved, and there's certainly a lot of theories about the Great Pyramid that suggest that it was hydrodynamic, or it had something. Water was part of its the mechanism that operated it or something. There's lots of different theories out there about it. I'm not particularly well versed in many of them. I think there may be something to the harmonics of having water that may have activated some of these structures in the past. I don't know. That's a pure speculation, but there is a correlation between like underground rivers, underground water sources that we see in in Peru. We see it in Egypt. There always seems